Hello, friends. Today I've got a new book, or rather a different book to introduce to you. Um, it's this one, The Magical Carpenter of Japan, with 70 full-page woodcuts by Hokusai, translated from the Japanese by Frederick Victor Dickins. Um, and it's hard to tell, hard to see, but it's published by Tuttle. Um, Charles E. Tuttle Company Publishers, Rutland, Vermont, and Tokyo, Japan. And the author was Rokujiyuen, which is, I'm not sure who that is. I'll have to check that later if I can find out. All right, so the thing is, how did I come by this book or come across this book? Well, it's actually a library book, and I was in the library of QTech, Kyushu Institute of Technology, which we normally call QTech, on Monday this week, December the 1st, 2025. Um, and it was very strange because it was almost like the book called to me, because it was sitting on the end of a bookcase, and I sort of passed by and then went back and had a look. Wait a minute, that's in English. What is that book? Um, yes, well, there are quite a lot of English books in the library of the university where I used to teach. Uh, and anyway, I had a closer look, and lo and behold, I discovered it was um, translated by Frederick Victor Dickins, who was a great friend of Sir Ernest Sato, and therefore uh, it was what they call in the modern jargon a no-brainer to borrow this book from the library. And so that's what I've done, and I've got it for 2 weeks until December the 15th. And I thought I would introduce the first part of it to you. So what I've done is I've scanned some pages, and I want to show that to you now. Just a moment, please. I want to share that. Let's see. Okay, you should be able to see that now. The Magical Carpenter of Japan, that's the front cover. It's a separate cover. Uh, The Magical Carpenter of Japan with 70 full-page woodcuts by Hokusai. Um, and what does that say in Japanese on the right? You've got something. Um, Hira, uh, Hira no Raku. I can't see that. It's a bit, sorry. Anyway, oops. Um, sorry. Uh, I'm jumping ahead there. So translated from the Japanese by Frederick Dickins, Frederick Victor Dickins, to give his full name. And so here is the next page, printed page. Let's make it a bit smaller, shall we, so you can see it properly. It's got the publisher there and the author, the translator, and of course the title once more. And over here on the left side, what have we got? We have the frontispiece, which is a reproduction of the woodcut used for the title page of the original Japanese book. Represented is the Suminawa reel and box a carpenter used when marking straight lines with inked cord. The characters read The Story of a Hida Craftsman by Rokujuen, illustrated by Katsushika Hokusai, complete in 6 volumes. Okay, so if we just move up a bit, we can see that. Um, all right, so that's all very good. Let's move on to the next page. Okay, we've got something about more in detail about the publishers and the representatives of the publisher. It was published in 1965. And actually, I think it was bought by a professor of the university who seems to have been a Professor Shibata, and he bought it for the princely sum of 1,350 yen. This is according to what it says on the inside cover, which I haven't scanned because it's very hard to see anyway. But it's the custom of the office staff at QTech to write who has bought the book for the library and how much it cost in pencil on the inside cover. So I've got a few where I've bought the book, and the same thing's been done for me. All right, so dedicated to Dr. William Owen Jones of Bowden, Cheshire, in memory of over 50 years friendship. Now, I don't know who he was, but it would be interesting to find out, wouldn't it? May 1912. And then we have some Japanese with romanji and an English translation. Yo no koto nareba todomi kanetsumo from Manyoshu, the famous book of, or Japanese anthology, as it says there. So is this world we live in made. No fleeting moment can be stayed. So is this world we live in made. No fleeting moment can be stayed. What does that mean? No fleeting moment can be stayed. Does it mean that time marches on? We cannot stop time, or I don't know. Comments, please, if you have any. Right, let's get on to the publisher's foreword. F.V. Dickins, the translator of The Magical Carpenter of Japan, first came to Japan with the British Navy in 1861. He studied Japanese largely by himself while working at the British Naval Hospital in Yokohama, and by 1865 had his translation of Hyakunin Isshu published in London. It was the first Japanese literary work published in English. He returned to Yokohama after studying law in London, practiced as a barrister, edited a newspaper, and became something of an expert on Japanese flora and fauna. He left Japan in 1879 and continued to translate Japanese novels and poetry until his death in 1915. In his introduction to the 1912 edition of The Magical Carpenter of Japan, Dickens wrote, "Some, perhaps, will prefer the pictures of Hokusai to the story he pestered his friend to tell. Although Rokujuen is now so little known, his story is by no means overshadowed by the illustrations. It was one of those rare collaborations in which author and illustrator worked together to produce a most satisfying and enjoyable result." Katsushika Hokusai, the artist, was born in 1760 near Edo and was adopted by the mirror maker to the shogun. The mirror maker? Was there only one mirror maker? I suppose so. At an early age, he drifted into wood carving and learned how to cut wood blocks. He is the only artist of the Japanese print school who had this training. At 19, he became a pupil of Shunsho, one of the greatest woodblock artists of his day. He soon showed that he had an unusual, not to say bewildering, personality. During his lifetime of 90 years, he changed his name at least 50 times whenever he felt a change of style warranted it, and lived in, 50 times. Extraordinary. Here we go. Lived in 93 different homes. He said it was cheaper to move house than to clean up. Goodness me, what a character. 2 years before working on the illustrations for The Magical Carpenter of Japan, deciding that he needed publicity, Hokusai painted a portrait of the Buddhist saint Daruma, nearly 60 feet high, and then, on a grain of rice, a picture of 2 sparrows. They had the desired result, and he was summoned to the shogun's court to show his skill. As he wrote later in his long life, "I have had a mania for drawing things since I was 6. At 75, I have learned something about the structure of nature, and when I am 80, I shall have made a little more progress. When I am 110, everything I draw, whether a line or a dot, will be alive. Let those who live as long as I see if I don't keep my word." Written at the age of 75 by me, once called Hokusai, now known as the old man crazy about drawing. 5 years after writing these lines, his daughter found him weeping because he could not learn to draw things as they really are. But the Hokusai who, according to Rokujiyuen, pestered him to write the story of Suminawa was a comparative youngster of 46. He had already published his famous Sights of the Eastern Capital series, and 2 years before he had started working on his 53 stages along the Tokaido. Why was he so anxious to have Rokujuen write the story of Suminawa? Did he simply want work to do? Tokaido, of course, is one of the famous roads from Edo, in the Edo era. Did he simply want work to do? Almost certainly not. Hokusai, who all his life was dogged by creditors, wasn't the kind of man to worry about such things as security and comfort. When a fire destroyed his home and all his notes and sketches, he could philosophically remark, "I came into the world without much." True enough, we all do, don't we? Except our genetic inheritance, I suppose. Many of the books illustrated by him bear signs of having been executed in a hurry. Not so in this case. Without wishing to read too much into them, these prints suggest that the artist did not consider them a task to be done as quickly as possible, so he could go back to drawing what he wanted. It seems more likely that the well-known folk tale appealed to his artist's imagination and that he considered it a challenging assignment. "I find that in all representations of Japanese and Chinese warriors," he wrote, "there is a lack of power and of movement, which are the essence of such subjects. Disappointed by this imperfection, I have been on fire to remedy it and so to supply what was lacking." Although he might not agree, he seems to us to have admirably caught these elusive qualities in some of the illustrations here. If the story of Rokujuen seems now to be overshadowed by the prince of Hokusai, this is not as it should be. Together they form a delightful combination, and this adventure story, fairy tale, love story, call it what you will, can be read today with a good deal of the excitement and pleasure it must have given its original readers in 1808. Gosh. So first published 1808 in Japanese and then translated in 1912 by Dickens, sorry. Why am I saying Gubbins? I mean Dickens, of course. Next is the foreword, which is by Dickens, I think. Let's just check that. Let's go to the end of this part and see. Whoa, I'm pretty sure that's by Dickens. Yes, FVD. Okay. So the foreword is by Dickens, Frederick Victor Dickens. Foreword. This monogatari, or tale of things, is no story of nakuyure, gibbering ghosts, or bakemono, boggarts, or tozoku, sanguinary robbers, or kataki-uchi, bloody vendettas, or wakezasu bushi, swaggering two-sworders, or te-ashiwaza madoi, almond leg mad encounters, that squirm and riot in the pages of the 18th century fiction and drama of old Japan, but a plain record laid in the days when the Mikado ruled his own, and the lively folk of Japan were not trampled underfoot by the many-graded despotism of the Tokugawa Jibun period. Yes, a plain tale in the eyes, or rather the ears of the Japanese, who lived in the sunset time of Kyu-Nihon, old Japan, for to them it would be a véridique histoire throughout. Do not the villains of the story show their ingenuity in engineering their own destruction? Was the fate unmerited of the youth and maid, denizens of the eternal land, who were guilty of the high crime of letting the elixir of life bubble over and be ruined, while they babbled of love, a thing of the dusty world, to be punished by weary wanderings in the tract of nothingness, amid perils scaped only through the craftsmanship of Master Ink-cord, whose marvellous devices, among them a gibbering ghost of his own make, were but the natural gain of his sojourn in Senland, and altogether credible things in the Dawnland 100 years ago. For the wooden horse that swiftly bore one villain to his doom in the water, and the timber Tombi, black Siberian kite, that bore another to his endless punishment amid the western winds, would be easy achievements enough, as every Japanese knew to the craftsman endowed by Rohan and favored by the great Lao Tse. I just want to try and find a véridique histoire, if I can quickly. Véridique. In English, véridique in English is truthful. So véridique histoire would be a truthful story, I think. That's according to Google anyway. Nor is the narrative without its gaiety. In the person of Matsumitsu, first the rival and later the henchman of Master Ink-cord, the clown of the story. nor are those who merit happiness unrewarded, for the lovers are borne back on a cloud like the Moon Maiden in the story of Taketori to the paradise whence they were expelled, while Master Inkcord spends eternity in plying saw and chisel under the auspices of the celestial craftsman. Note for Taketori, see my Primitive and Medieval Japanese Texts, 1906, Clarendon Press. That would be Dickens's translation. But some, perhaps, will prefer the pictures of Hokusai to the story he pestered his friend to tell. And perhaps they are right. Rokujuen is but a plain chronicler with no pretensions to style, and, as has been shown, he deals not with the marvellous nor with the ways of lofty or violent folk, but at least he has limned more than one portrait of the life of old Japan, though like his friend Hokusai rather of his own time than of the faraway age when Japan had not yet fallen away from the mild rule of City Royal. For Rokujuen was born in 1753 and died in his 78th year in 1830. The story was written in or about 1808. He was the son of an innkeeper of Little Denma Street in Old Yedo, who was also an artist known as such under the style of Ishikawa Toyonobu. The son carried on the business more or less. His personal name, Na, was Gabo. His quasi-nicknames, Azana, were various, Gorosai, Gekiryo, etc. His usual name, Tsusho, Ishikawa Gorohyohei. Rokujuen was his pen name. Rokujuen, is that not 60 yen? I'm not sure. It's hard to tell with only the romanji. For a time, he studied comic verse under the famous Shokusanjin or Ohotan Ampo, and became known as Yadoya no Meshi or Iimori, i.e. innkeeper meshi or boiled rice. As a youth, Gabo was given to dissipation, but after his father's death, he changed his habits and took to study. His quarrelsomeness brought him various troubles, and finally he was expelled from Yedo and went to live at Fuchu in Tama County, in the province of Musashi, not far from the capital of the Tycoon. At first, he devoted himself to Japanese poetry, waka, but later to comic verse, kyoka. From City Royal, Kyoto, he received the style or degrees of Hogen, Eye of the Law of Buddha, and Sōshō, academic artist, perhaps, question mark. His principal literary work was a lexicon to the famous Genji monogatari story of the loves of Genji, the most classical of Japanese classics. He was also the author of a very extensive and learned repertory of elegant diction, the Gagen Shuran, part only of which has been printed. He compiled, too, a collection of comic stanzas by different hands, and wrote several novels beside the Hida no Takumi, itself not mentioned in the Jimmei Jisho, such as Half a Day in the Northern Hamlet, Yoshiwara, or Gay Quarter of Yedo, and Modes and Manners of City Royal. Gay, of course, had a different meaning in 1912. Here we're talking about Yoshiwara, which is the pleasure quarter, I suppose. In the celebrated preface to the Kokinshu, the famous Kino Tsurayuki, 10th century, wrote that a good poet was able to move heaven and earth. On this, Gabor composed the following parody. Poets here, poets there, when worst I love them most. Then least stirs heaven and earth, I swear, the versifying host. The above account is based on the Jimmei Jisho, Japanese Dictionary of National Biography, and Dr. Florenz's Geschichte der japanischen Literatur. That's footnote number 2. Like others of his craft, he was a skilled plagiarist. The episode of the Kudara artist, for instance, who is asked to enter the pavilion mentioned in chapter 10 with 4 doors and can enter by none of them, is given in the Uji Tales, as may be read in Dr. Aston's History of Japanese Literature, page 120. The following amusing story is given by Mr. Chamberlain, Basil Hall Chamberlain, in his Romanized Japanese Reader, page 51. It is taken from the Shimi no Sumikawa, the bookworm's abode, by the celebrated scholar Ishikawa Gabo, and is called The Efficacy of Myoga, a sort of ginger. A merchant who was hawking silk about the country knocked at the door of a certain house when evening had come and asked for a night's lodging, to which, consenting, the inmates opened and let him in. The host's wife, being a woman of an evil disposition, thought to herself, on seeing the heavy look of the traveller's pack, would that he could forget this pack when he goes away, I could take it for myself. And she whispered the same to the host, who replied, when people have eaten myoga, that's ginger, the effect is that their mind is stupefied and they forget things. Hearing this, the wife put myoga in all the relishes which she gave their guest to eat. Well, the merchant, having risen at dawn, started off. When the wife went into the place where he had slept and looked, thinking to see the things he had forgotten, there was absolutely not a single thing. The myoga I gave him to eat had no effect, said she, to which the host replied, nay, the myoga has had its effect. He has gone away forgetting something very important. What has he forgotten? Asked the wife. He has gone away, said the husband, forgetting the payment he should have made me for his night's lodging. Oh, very funny. Very good. My copy of the monogatari consists of 6 thin volumes and is a new edition undated. Each volume contains about 24 leaves or 48 pages, block printed on one side only, folded with the double edges outside. The text is in kanamajiri, part syllabic and part ideographic, and most of the ideographs, Chinese characters, kanji, as we would say, are accompanied by a columnar transliteration into syllabic, often rather a hindrance than an aid. The style is quite simple and easy, but of some of the words and expressions the sense remains obscure to me. The xylographs are among the very best of Hokusai's book illustrations that I have met with. I must not omit my thanks to my friendly publisher, Mr. Gowans, for his welcome aid and profitable criticism, as well as for his robust faith in the great merits of things Japanese. Seien ni oite migi wo kakioki sōbō. This 15th day of September 1911. FVD, Frederick Victor Dickins. Aston there is, of course, another of Sato's close friends and correspondents, and he also worked in the consular service. W.G. Aston, William George Aston. So, now we have the preface. Who is the preface by? Let's have a quick check. By Rokujuen himself. Okay. This is by the author. Preface. To write such a book as this, methought, would bring me no honour, nor win me any one's applause. And by the way, this is the translation of Dickens, I think. So that, though often requested to do so, I had altogether abandoned the idea when recently my friend, Master Hokusai, the famous artist, paid me several visits and so pestered me to undertake the task that it would have been churlish on my part to refuse him. Thus it came about that I seized my pen brush, though reluctantly. The main subject of the book is the craftsmanship of a Hida man, but I have also used the old story of Takeshiba to add to its interest. 'Tis but a rough performance, countrified in style, destitute of elegance, and very full, no doubt, of awkward sentences that will sound ill enough in the care of the reader. Of the monastery of Takeshiba, the history will be found in the Sarashina Journal. It goes back as far as the old days of the foundation of the shrine of Isonokami. Isonokami, a place in Yamato where there are several ancient shrines, and a temple of unknown date, often referred to as symbolic of great antiquity. Isonokami is referred to more than once in the anthology. It is used as a makura kotoba, epithetical of antiquity. See My Primitive and Medieval Japanese Texts, Oxford, 1906. There exists in Great Yedo a place known as Shibaura, Shiba Strand, where some folk find traces of Takeshiba, but this is nothing but a vulgar error, such as might be expected from an over-clever fellow. After reading these pages, there will be folk, no doubt, who will ridicule the author, saying, "Why, what a juvenile, contemptible spirit is this, unashamed of producing stuff of this sort and perversely inventing things that never were." To them I would reply that they cannot have heard of the monk of old who retired to the moor of Abe to weave matting there. Rokujuen, the moor of Abe. In the Kongyokushu, it is said that the monk Kenko, the author of the Tsuzure Gusa, retired to a pine forest on the moor of Abe in Setsu, near the great monastery of Tenno, accompanied by his disciple Jakkan and a kozo, or boy, named Miyotsuru Maro. There he took to weaving common floor matting in order to support himself. So the learned author of this monogatari took to inferior work of that kind to eke out a livelihood. Good. All right. So next we have contents. See what we can do here. Move over a bit. Come on. I'll move down a bit anyway. Contents. Yes, there we are. List of illustrations, introduction, list of principal personages. Then chapter 1, Suminawa, how Suminawa progressed in his art. That is the chapter which I will give in detail shortly. And chapter 2, Mount Horai, how Suminawa reached Senland and got to the heart thereof, and how he attained to perfection in his art. Chapter 3, Takeshiba, how Yamabito went out to view the cherry blossoms and was insulted by Hirooka, and how he came to meet Suminawa. Chapter 4, Hirooka, how Hirooka carried off Yamabito's mother and how she was rescued from death by Matsumitsu. All right, and next we carry on to the next page. Chapter 5, Ishibama, how the daughter of Funanushi fell in love with Yamabito. Chapter 6, The Mechanical Boat, how the stern rope of the mechanical boat constructed by the craftsman of Hida snapped and parted Yamabito and Murasaki. Chapter 7, The Bestowal of the Bride, how Funanushi gave his daughter to Yamabito and became a priest. Chapter 8, The Dream Way, how the princess Nyoichi, daughter of the Mikado, saw Yamabito in a daydream and fell in love with him. Chapter 9, The Going Up to City Royal, which is Kyoto, how Suminawa and Yamabito saved the life of the host of a house they lodged at on their journey. Chapter 10, Holy Bishamon, how Suminawa defeated an artist of Kudara in a contest of skill, and how he made an image of Bishamonten that cured the Mikado of a sore disease. Right. I think that's the bottom of the page, yes. Okay, carry on. Next page. Chapter 11, The Night Chaplain, how Yamabito talked of the sake jars in his home and lamented, and how the Princess Nyoichi observed him and made him tell his story, and how he visited her secretly, and the bonds of love were established between them. Chapter 12, The Bridge of Seta, how Yamabito carried off the princess and fought with a pilgrim, and how Matsumitsu removed some planks from the bridge of Seta to delay pursuit. Chapter 13, The Chinese Cat, how on their journey Yamabito and Matsumitsu were taken for highwaymen and tortured, and how they marvelously escaped death by the help of the Chinese cat. Well done, the cat. Chapter 14, The Latticed Chariot, how Yamabito and the princess were wedded and went up again into City Royal to Kyoto, and how the hut of the priest Funanushi was the beginning of the monastery of Takeshiba, and how finally Suminawa and Yamabito and the princess were all translated to Senland. Good. Next we have a list of illustrations. The frontispiece, which we've already seen, is a reproduction of the woodcut used for the title page of the original Japanese book. Uh, all right. Illustration number 1, the Hida Craftsman. Precious scion of Inabe, rarest, daintiest craftsman wert thou, Suminawa. Long descent thou didst not vaunt, thou, but the lord of craftsmen wert thou, Suminawa. Illustration number 2, examples of the Hida craftsman's skill. Number 3, the sennin preparing the elixir. Illustration number 4, arrival at the royal palace of a company of Hida craftsmen. Illustration number 5, a cock made of wood by Suminawa attacked by a real cock. Gosh. Illustration number 6, the servitors of the sheriff sent to arrest the craftsman fall into the trap. Illustration number 7, the trial of skill between Matsumitsu and the craftsman of Hida. Now that's all in chapter 1, so I'm going to show you those 7 illustrations shortly. The rest of them are in the continuing on in the other chapters. So illustration number 8, the craftsman goes into the mountains to procure timber. Number 9, the immortal, the Lord Rohan, endows Suminawa with magic powers of craftsmanship and sends him back to his own village. And we have quite a lot of illustrations, as you can see. Plate number 10, illustration number 10. I'm sorry, there's a police siren going on outside. Can't do anything about that. Plate 10, the punishment of the sennin youth and maid in Mount Horai. Plate 11, Takeshiba no Yamabito, going out to view the cherry blossoms along with his mother, is insulted by one named Hirooka, whereupon an unknown youth appears, rescues mother and son, and drives off Hirooka. Plate number 12, Matsumitsu, while on his journey in search of the good, meets a man bearing a bundle and fights with him that he may get possession of it. On the right, these are page numbers, okay, in this edition. Plate 13, Hirooka seizes and keeps prisoner Yamabito's mother, but Matsumitsu makes a bridge and lets her down, whereupon a stranger carries her off on his back. Number 14, on the accusation of Hirooka, Yamabito and Matsumitsu are roughly handled and tortured. Oh dear. Plate 15, Matsumitsu mounts the wooden horse made by the Hida craftsman, which suddenly runs away with him. As he is being carried along in fear and trembling, a tall man appears at a place called Ishibama, stops the horse and rescues him. Plate 16, the Hida craftsman in pursuit of Matsumitsu arrives at Ishibama and meets Funanushi and his son for the first time. Plate 17, Funanushi's daughter, Murasaki, being in love with Yamabito, Matsumitsu acts as go-between and accompanies her with the intention that they may meet in Asakusa village. Plate number 18, Matsumitsu, in order that Yamabito and Murasaki may have an interview, sends off the servants on false errands. Number 19, Murasaki waits in the boat for Yamabito and, using her undergirdle for a stern rope, tries to enable him to haul the boat in. Number 20, the anger of Funanushi on his daughter requesting him to allow her to become the wife of Yamabito. Plate number 21, Hirooka enters Yamabito's house, steals something, and is about to kill his mother when Saomaro appears and fights with him. Plate 23, Funanushi relates the circumstances of his daughter Murasaki's death to Yamabito and is about to start on a pilgrimage round the land when Hirooka arrives and attempts to take vengeance on Yamabito, but is fastened by the craftsman of Hida to the crane that he had made and sent off on it. Okay. Plate number 23, in a daydream, the princess Nyoichi meets Yamabito and is joined in wedlock with him at the instigation of Suminawa. Plate 24, as the craftsman of Hida is on the way up to City Royal, Kyoto, with Yamabito and Matsumitsu, Matsumitsu, hearing Kusakai boasting of his riding, mounts the wooden horse and defeats him in a race. Mounts the wooden horse. Okay. Plate 25, Kusakai, plotting with his sister, kills the host. As the corpse comes out in pursuit of them, they mount the horse, which stands before the door, and make their escape. Plate 26, the contest of skill in their art between the craftsman of Hida and the man from Kudara. Plate 27, the Bishamonten made by the craftsman of Hida manifests itself and drives off an evil spirit. Plate 28, as Yamabito is secretly entering the princess's chamber, the night chaplain observes him and lays hold of him. Plate 29, as the chaplain and the servants are ill-treating and flogging Yamabito, the craftsman arrives, exposes the chaplain's evil doings and drives him off. Plate 30, priest Funanushi, lodging in a wayside shrine by the crossroads of Saga, is visited by his daughter's spirit. Plate 31, on their journey, Yamabito and Matsumitsu are taken for highwaymen and suffer hardship. All right, and on the next page we have plate 32. Their host Tohira, when he sees the Chinese cat, rescues Yamabito and Matsumitsu and recognizes them as benefactors of his father. He orders a number of farmers to escort the princess eastwards. Plate 33. The princess arrives at the Takeshiba's house, but Yamabito's mother will not listen to her and rebukes her angrily. Plate 34. The farmers of Takeshiba receive the royal commissioner. Plate 35. Suminawa, as royal commissioner, enters, joins Yamabito and the princess in wedlock, and causing them to ride in a chariot made by himself, accompanies them to City Royal, to Kyoto. And there's a little note here, to avoid any misunderstandings. It should be noted that from this point onwards, everything in the large type of the text is in the Japanese original. The notes in small type to the text and to the plates are the translators. All right. Good. So looking at this introduction, everything in large type is the original and the small type is the notes in small type and are the translator's notes. Okay. So, introduction. There's quite a long footnote here by Dickens. In the Sarashina journal, the said journal is from the pen of the daughter of the Ason Sugawara no Takasue, fifth in descent. And then this is quite a long note by Dickens. At least I think it must be by Dickens, according to what I've just read. Let's see. Here we go. The Nikki, or journals, are among the pleasantest and most characteristic of Japanese literary works. The Sarashina Nikki is the record of a journey from Shimosa to Kyoto in AD 1021. So this is a travel diary, basically, and of a second journey from Kyoto to Sarashina in Shinano some years later, Aston's History of Japanese Literature. The following extract will give some idea of the manner of the contents. As we crossed the Ashigara range, part of the Hakone system, for 4 or 5 days, a dreadful obscurity reigned. Even where we entered the hills were the trees so crowded that we scarce got a glimpse of the sky. There we took lodging. There was no moon, and the night was so dark that one might easily lose one's way. There appeared 3 singing women. Whence coming we knew not. One was about 50 years old, the next 20, and the youngest 14 to 15. They squatted beneath an umbrella in front of our cabin. When lights were brought, they said they were granddaughters of a former singer named Koada. Their long hair framed in their faces picturesquely enough. Their complexions were fair and fine. We thought they might belong to some noble house, and our sympathies went out to them. Their voices were incomparably pure and clear as their charming songs floated heavenwards. They excited our interest, and we bade them come nearer and took pleasure in their company. One of us declared they had no equal in the home provinces, even, and they replied by singing sweetly, "Should you with Naniwa singers compare us?" We were greatly moved at the sight of these wandering, singing women. Naniwa is Osaka, right? Area. With their pure faces and incomparably fine voices traversing these fearful mountains, and could not refrain from tears. It was for my poor little heart an endless torment to be obliged to leave our lodging here. But with dawn we began to cross the range. How terrible seemed the recesses of the hills. We saw what's that word? The clouds beneath our feet in a small space under a tree in the middle of oh dear, in the middle of the hills grew 3 mallows, and our attendants were surprised to find them so far from the world flourishing there among the mountains. In 3 places we came to torrential waters rushing down the mountain valleys. At last, after many difficulties, we got away from the hills and halted at Sekiyama. Florenz, Geschichte der japanischen Literatur, History of Japanese Literature, by Florenz. So, that's a very long note, isn't it? Footnote. So let me start again. In the Sarashina journal, the said journal is from the pen of the daughter of the Ason Sugawara no Takasue, 5th in descent. Let's go to the next page. From the Lord Sugawara Michizane, it is said, if you want to know where it is, the hill was in past time called Takeshiba Hill. There was a man of those parts who was a eiji, whose duty it was to look after the fire kept up in the palace guardroom. He had also to sweep up the court in front of the palace, and one day, while so employed, muttered to himself, why should my lot be so mean and wretched a one? At home there are jars of sake, 3s and 7s, and over them hangs a dried gourd, which, when the south wind blows, swings to the north, and when the north wind blows, swings to the south, and when the west wind blows, swings to the east, and when the east wind blows, swings to the west, and oh! If I could now watch this gourd swinging to the 4 winds of heaven, but I cannot see it. So he went on muttering to himself in his longing for home. Now, the Mikado of those days had a daughter who was greatly petted, and on a time she went all alone just outside the misu and leaned against one of the wooden pillars and looked around and graciously heard what the youth was muttering to himself and had pity on him and wondered what he meant by what he said about the gourd and its swaying with the 4 winds. So she lifted up the misu and called out, saying, let that youth come here. And he humbly obeyed and came up in front of the balustrade of the veranda. Then the princess said to him, tell me what thou wast saying just now. Then he repeated to her what he had been saying about the sake jars and the gourd, whereupon she cried, take me there and show them to me. Hang on, so we've got some notes here. Footnote number 1, Sugawara Michizane, a prince who flourished in the 9th century. He had literary pretensions and was deified as Temmangu, god of calligraphy. And 1 or 2 other notes there. All right, take them there and show them to me. Though it was, up we go, a terrible and fearful thing to do, so it had to be. And he took her on his back and went down to those parts and bore her thither. And he knew that, of course, men would pursue him, and so when he came to the bridge of Seta, he set down the princess and broke some planks of the bridge and fled towards the east land, still bearing the princess on his back. And after faring thus 7 days and 7 nights, arrived at the land of Musashi. As there was nothing else to be done, he went up again to City Royal, Kyoto, and reported to the Mikado, the emperor, all that had happened. There was no use making words about the matter. He might be found guilty of a crime, but the princess could not be taken back. So this Takeshiba man was made Lord of Musashi for his life, but the administration of the province was not given to him, but a rescript of the Mikado conferred it upon the princess, and a palace was built like that of the City Royal for her to dwell in. When the palace and the princess and all had passed away, a monastery was built upon the spot, and this is the monastery of Takeshiba. As to the old story of Takeshiba, I can say nothing certain about it. In the Masakado Ki we find Gunji Musashi no Takeshiba. This phrase may refer to it. So, number 1, the long bridge across an arm of Lake Biwa. That's the bridge of Seta, Lake Biwa, Biwako. Right, in Shiga Prefecture. List of principal personages is next. Pronounce vowels as in Italian, but U as in English, put, bull, never as cut, run. Consonants as in English, H being well aspirated. Each element of a diphthong is to be pronounced. The vowels are not slurred, and the words are almost without accent as in French. So Suminawa, master ink cord, the craftsman. Matsumitsu, his rival, afterwards his companion. Yamabito, the youth expelled from Horai and reborn in the world, his mother. The princess Nyoichi, prima or prima sola, the maid expelled from Horai and reborn in the world. Hirooka, a villain suppressor of Yamabito and his mother. Rohan, pan of Lu, see note page 68. Funanushi, father of Murasaki, afterwards a pilgrim priest. Murasaki, daughter of Funanushi, in love with Yamabito. Saomaro, adopted son of Funanushi and half-brother of Yamabito. Kusakai and wife, murderous assailants of the wife's father. An artist of Kudara, Korea, vanquished by Suminawa. The night chaplain, a dissolute priest. Tahira, host of Yamabito and the princess. Munehiko, is that? A tyrannous officer, oppressor of Yamabito. And Hoshi Lao-tse, founder of Taoism. Okay, and on we go. So here is the start of the text. Chapter 1, Suminawa. How Suminawa progressed in his art. Hida no takumi is not a name but a designation. In former days, the province of Hida was free of tax and corvée, but each village had to furnish 10 craftsmen for service on public works at City Royal, Kyoto. In the year period Joguan, as the chronicles tell us, 100 men were levied in the province to serve on government works of all kinds, palaces, halls, monasteries, shrines, and well and garden buildings. And the men so levied were known as Hida Craftsmen. What concerns us in these pages is the story of a particularly clever craftsman who distinguished himself among the crowd of Hida men by his great ability. Full of the spirit of his craft, he got beyond mere saw and chisel work and fashioned the most, and that's when the next page starts. So there's a note here about takumi, which is not the first. Hida no takumi. Takumi means skill, capacity, also skillful person, craftsman, builder, and so architect in modern language. Daiku, a Chinese word, great craftsman, carpenter, architect. Its etymology is ta, hand, kumu, devise, or ta may be an old intensive prefix. Hida is a small central province of the main island in the East Mountain Circuit, the most mountainous, perhaps remote and old-fashioned in Japan. 7 of its mountains exceed 10,000 feet in height. It is thickly covered with forest, hence its inhabitants are renowned as woodworkers, builders, architects, and so forth. Hida no takumi, Hida craftsmen, were specially entrusted with the building and repairs of the palace and public buildings in City Royal, Kyoto, and enjoyed the privilege of exemption from taxes and service, as mentioned in the story. Joguan or Jokuan, manifestation of virtue, is the name of the Nengo or year period, AD, what's that, 859 to 876 in the reign of the Mikado Seiwa. Okay, so let's go back to the main text. Full of the spirit of his craft, he got beyond mere saw and chisel work and fashioned the most wonderful creatures of sky and land, birds out of ends of wood and horses out of slabs of timber and so forth. In fact, he was the marvel of his time. Under what Mikado this genius lived has not been precisely ascertained, but whenever it was, he dwelt in Hida and was known as Inabe no Suminawa. His father and mother had died while he was quite young, and he lived all alone. According to the custom of the country, when not working on the land, he busied himself with saw and chisel, and by dint of industry became a thorough master of his craft, so superior to his fellows that even the oldest of them were astonished, while all acclaimed him as a true master craftsman. When he made a common cock out of a piece of wood, so lifelike was it, that on seeing it, a real cock would flap its wings and run at it. If he fashioned a rat, any passing cat would spring at it, and so forth. His skill being so extraordinary in this kind of work, folk came from far and near to order such diverting objects, and in numbers so great as to make a sort of marketplace in front of his gate. But those who were crafty in their ways or gave themselves airs got no answer from him. Old folk and humble customers, on the other hand, never asked him in vain. They got all they wanted. At that time, the sheriff of the county was a man named Kino Taketoshi. He was of a cruel and avaricious disposition. He oppressed and despised the common folk and behaved like a thorough tyrant. He was fond of drink too, and one day sent some of his satellites to Suminawa's house to order a sake bowl. Suminawa, who disliked the sheriff's evil ways, was in no hurry to execute the order. Days passed, and the sheriff got angry at the delay. "This low fellow," he cried, "shows me but scant respect. 'Tis intolerable that he should treat me with such insolence." So Suminawa means the carpenter's ink cord used for striking a straight line, and gunji in this text may be thus rendered with sufficient accuracy. Thus rendered as sheriff, in other words, rendered as sheriff with sufficient accuracy. Gunji is sheriff, or near enough, sufficient accuracy. So he told some of his servitors to go to the craftsman's house and seize him, and bring him there and then, bound, to the mansion. They went accordingly, and as they reached the entrance, bawled out, "His Honour the Sheriff bids thee attend before him." There was no immediate answer to this summons, so, without even taking off their straw sandals, the men rudely mounted the veranda floor, and, thrusting back the shoji, the paper screens, were about to enter the house, when somehow the house must have been so constructed, suddenly mats and floor turned topsy-turvy, and the 5 men who composed the party fell headlong into a hollow space underneath, out of which they could not possibly extricate themselves. Trembling with fear, their insolence all vanished, they looked up in despair, exclaiming, "We have behaved rudely, sir, but it was at the sheriff's order we came. We implore you to spare our lives." So they clamoured all together, but Suminawa merely burst into loud laughter, after which he let down a ladder and allowed them to mount it. When they reached the floor, they prostrated themselves on the mats, crying, "If you do not deign, sir, to appear before our master, what will be the fate of us wretches? We beg you to accompany us. You see in what a miserable plight we are. Have pity on us and help us." To this entreaty Suminawa made no answer. "I had made up my mind not to obey the summons, but out of compassion for you, I will." He then started walking on in front, while the sheriff's fellows followed gladly at his heels. The sheriff, who was standing in the entrance of his mansion, saw the party approaching, and catching sight of Suminawa, began to make big eyes at him, to knit his brows, and frown terribly. But Suminawa, quite composedly, took his seat and asked why he had been sent for in such fiery haste. Yeah, there we are. Shoji, paper-paned sliding windows. Yeah, I said paper screens, didn't I? Pretty much the same thing. "That sake bowl I ordered," cried the sheriff angrily. "A month has gone by, and I have not yet got it. What dost think a sheriff may be, that thou servest me so? I will smash thy rascal face. Let drive a shaft through thy paunch." In his anger he made to rush upon Suminawa, but the craftsman calmly drew from his breast pocket a carefully wrapped up packet and handed it to Taketoshi. "Here is the sake bowl you ordered of me, but if you treat me roughly, I will throw it away on the spot." Mending his face a little, the sheriff answered, "Ah, that is the bowl, is it? Thou'st lost no time about it, eh? A good blow of my fist were a proper payment." "If ever again," he added, taking the bowl in his hand and examining it, if ever again thou dealest with any order of mine in this negligent fashion, thou'lt smart for it. Now thou mayst go away." Suminawa thus rudely dismissed the sheriff. The sheriff regarded the bowl. Suminawa thus rudely dismissed, the sheriff regarded the bowl attentively. "My word, 'tis a clever piece of work," he cried, holding it still in his hand. While he was thus feasting his eyes upon it, his servitors informed him that a neighbouring sheriff had come on a visit. The guest was shown into the reception room, where the host soon joined him, and the pair entered into conversation. Presently Taketoshi brought out the bowl, saying, "I got this today only. Let me offer you a draught of sake." The liquor was fetched accordingly, and the guest was invited to take some. Holding out the bowl, the host told the maid, to fill it with sake for the visitor, and she did so. But what happened? All at once the bowl became extraordinarily heavy and fell out of his hand on the mats. Scolding the girl, he bade her fill the bowl again, but it seemed as if he had got hold of a boulder. He could not keep the bowl in his hand. It turned over, and all its contents were splashed on the mats, in which they were lost. The guest was astonished, and took the bowl into his own hand, but when sake was again poured into it, the bowl turned over as before, and all the sake was spilled. The bowl was then grasped in both hands, but the result was the same. Next it was held tightly with all the strength of both hands, and every effort was made to prevent its capsizing, but all to no purpose. It seemed as if some man of prodigious strength wrenched it away. Time after time the two sheriffs tried to hold it, but always the bowl turned over of itself, and at last host and guest were so astonished that they did not know what to think. Taketoshi, beside himself with rage, roared out, "'Tis that fellow trifling with me again! Here, you men, some of you run after him and bring him back!" But remembering their former experience, the men all hung back, and none of them would stir. "An idea has struck me," cried the visitor. "Your bowl-maker prides himself, no doubt, upon his skill in Chinese toy-work. Let us see if we cannot provide him with a rival. There is a man in my country named Hinokuma Matsumitsu, who has not his like for craftsmanship in those parts. We might pit him against your man and see who wins in a trial of skill. Should Suminawa lose, his tools can be taken from him, and he will be disgraced, as well as lose his craft." The proposal pleased the host, who said, "Well then, pray fetch the man here as soon as possible." It was so arranged, and the visitor took his departure. The day but one after he returned, bringing the rival craftsman with him. To look upon, the fellow had a head like a mallet's, set upon a neck like an adze handle. His teeth reminded one of a saw, and his nose resembled a sort of hammerhead. But all the same, he had the air of a capable workman well versed in his craft. The sheriff Taketoshi was delighted and said to the man, "Now be good enough somehow or other to put this Suminawa to rout and disgrace him." Matsumitsu grinned and answered, "I don't think anyone in the land can better me. I have heard of this Suminawa, but have never yet met him. Even without your order, sir, I feel sure beforehand that I shall make a laughing-stock of him, and I am glad to have the chance," scratching his head as he spoke. "Then let us go," cried the two sheriffs, and, accompanied by Matsumitsu, they went to Suminawa's house. As they approached, they noticed the eaves of what seemed to be a kitchen only, and near it a small house in which the craftsman dwelt. As it was springtime, the cherry trees in the forecourt were in full bloom and afforded a pretty sight. The house had a good appearance, but there was nothing out of the common about it. It was of quite modern construction. Suminawa came forward to greet his visitors, and saluting them courteously, led them within. Then Taketoshi's companion turned to the craftsman and said, pointing to Matsumitsu, "This man here is one Matsumitsu, who lives near me. He is a craftsman like you, and I thought I would bring him here to make your acquaintance." "A fellow craftsman, sir, are you?" cried Suminawa, addressing Matsumitsu politely. "In this poor place," he added, "I have nothing to offer you to eat, but pray, gentlemen, accept a draught of sake." Taketoshi at once drew from his breast pocket the bowl Suminawa had made for him, saying as he set it on the mats, "We will drink out of this bowl first of all." Suminawa accordingly took up the sake pot and filled the bowl. Taketoshi watched him, but the bowl seemed quite an ordinary one, and nothing happened. When the bowl had been emptied, it was offered to Taketoshi, who held it out to be filled. Not a drop was spilled, and the bowl looked just like any other bowl. "The last time sake was poured into the bowl," said Taketoshi, "it turned over, and all the liquor was spilled. It seems a queer sort of bowl enough." "You don't say so, sir," exclaimed Suminawa inquiringly, putting on an innocent look, to which the sheriff could find nothing to reply. Well, they all went on drinking sake in turns for a while until Matsumitsu came forward and, addressing Suminawa, said, "House building is our chief business, I think, but you, I hear, astonish folk with your Chinese toy work. Is that so?" said Matsumitsu. "As you hint, sir, such mechanical things are mere trifles. Still, house building is no very difficult art, A quite ordinary person, if he does not lose touch of his carpenter's square, can put together even mansions and halls easily enough. Mechanical toy things need only a knife to make them, to be sure, but here again the carpenter's square must not be neglected, or the common craftsman will achieve nothing out of the ordinary. Well, even in knife work, I don't think anyone beats me, rejoined Matsumitsu. I have come here today to see which of us two is the best in that sort of craftsmanship. If I lose, I shall ask you to take me as a pupil. Shall we make the trial? For my part, replied Suminawa, I don't like that sort of rivalry. I beg you to let me off. On hearing this, Matsumitsu said to himself, the fellow is afraid of me. He thinks he will lose and so wants to escape. But aloud he exclaimed, I should like a trial of skill, if only as a lesson to learn something by. The two sheriffs also urged Suminawa to comply, and seeing there was no help for it, the Hida craftsman consented. Well, sirs, I will do as you wish. Let some of our work be produced and compared, and the winner declared. Thereupon Matsumitsu drew from his breast pocket a crab made of wood, saying, It was only after many years' thought that I attained to make this thing. Turning a sort of handle in the crab's belly, he set it on the mats. It began at once to move its legs and run about just like a real crab. The two sheriffs were delighted, and praised Matsumitsu so warmly that his face shone with pleasure. Let me see anything to compare with that, he ejaculated confidently. I will show a crab too, put in Suminawa, one I made in the order of a gentleman of City Royal of Kyoto. Producing a box from his breast pocket, he set it in front of Matsumitsu, who took off the lid. All at once a crab jumped out of the box and began to run about on the mats. Spectators followed the crab with their eyes and saw it climb the walls, bubble out spume, move its nippers, crawl over the ceiling head down, and presently climb down the wall and run about over the mats. Suminawa then placed the box before it, and with a sudden leap, the crab jumped in, after which he closed the box and returned it to his breast pocket. The two sheriffs were beside themselves with amazement at this marvelous exhibition. Matsumitsu colored somewhat at this first defeat, but showed no dismay. Colored, he went red a bit, embarrassed. These Chinese toys, he cried, are nothing but children's playthings. As proofs of craftsmanship, they are worthless. Look at this, he added, producing something wrapped up in silk coverings, which he undid and displayed the horrific mask of the Chinese hero Lan Ling. So terrified were the sheriffs that their hair stood on end with fear, and they had to turn away their faces. Suminawa considered the mask and admitted it to be a fine piece of workmanship. I too have something here, he added, which I made for my own amusement, drawing a silk-wrapped packet from his breast pocket. Undoing the cord, he displayed what appeared to be the freshly decapitated head of a woman of some 50 years of age. What an object! It almost smelt of blood. The sheriffs did not dare to look at it. They turned away their faces with horror. Matsumitsu took the head in his hand and exclaimed, This is no counterpart, I am sure. 'Tis a real woman's head. Where did you get it? 'Tis a horrid trick, this. He then put it down on the mats, but Suminawa declared, Nay, 'tis no human head. I myself made it and hung a horse bell inside it. Strike the head and you will hear it tinkle. Matsumitsu accordingly took up the head again and shook it, and sure enough, the cling-clang of a horse bell was heard, and it became clear that it was merely an artificial head and not a real one. Though an obstinate fellow, Matsumitsu had to yield to this proof of his rival's superiority. How can I better such a craftsman as this? He said to himself. It is impossible. But aloud he said, This house of yours, sir, did you build it yourself, or had you workmen to help you? Okay. For so small a house as this, was the reply, no help was needed. But as a sort of upper story, the house is not of ordinary construction. What upper story? Cried Matsumitsu. What do you mean? Suminawa rose and went to a place where was to be seen what looked like a main timber of the house, and pulled out a wedge. Observe, sirs, he cried, what is going to happen? As he spoke, the building began to move upwards of itself, and rose to a height of 10 feet or more until the occupants of the room were able to look down upon the tops of the trees in the forecourt. The two sheriffs, and still more Matsumitsu, felt their livers fail within them and gaped so widely with wonder that they could hardly close their mouths again. Extraordinary, an amazing piece of craftsmanship indeed, they cried with one voice admiringly. But with what intention did you build such a house as this? To avoid the danger of fire, was the answer. You see, my house is but a mean one with few servants, so that in case of fire breaking out near me, there would be hardly anyone to carry away my possessions to a place of safety. Hence I built the house in such a way that it could sink down into the hollow underneath if a fire broke out in the neighbourhood, while on the other hand, by rising to the height of an upper story, I could enjoy the coolth in summertime. The coolth. The coolness? Not sure. I built the house with my own hands, by night only and in 10 days' time, so that my neighbours know nothing about its mechanism. Did they know they would crowd to see it? And this I should find unpleasant. If they knew, they would crowd to see it. Yeah. A marvellous arrangement indeed. Now, pray make the house descend. Leaving the room, Suminawa went below, where he busied himself with something for a while. Returning soon, he exclaimed, "Now observe, sirs, the building will sink down again." He had no sooner uttered the words than the house began to descend slowly until the floor was some 10 feet below the ground, where it stopped, hidden in darkness, black as that of the cave of old. After a time, he again turned a knob, and the house began to rise until the floor was level with the ground, and it resumed its ordinary appearance. Matsumitsu bowed his head upon the mats, exclaiming, "I am but a man of petty wit, not 1/100th part of your capacity do I possess, sir. So far I have only maligned and insulted you, and I know not how to excuse the rudeness of my conduct. Henceforth I would fain be your pupil for a long time and learn from you how to exercise our craft." "I have no talent for teaching," said Suminawa with a smile. "Still, after what you have said, I will do my best to explain all I can." The sheriff Taketoshi, who had been full of prejudice against Suminawa, quite changed his attitude after witnessing these proofs of the master's capacity. "No ordinary man," he murmured, rolling his tongue back as he took his departure in company with his colleague. From that time forth, Suminawa's fame echoed more and more through those parts until there was not a single person who did not come to be aware of his amazing skill. And then it seems we have the plates. Just a minute. How to show you those. Yes, well, that's the first plate, plate 1. We've got a stalk and a man seated. The Hida Craftsman. "Precious scion of Inabe, rarest, daintiest craftsman wert thou, Suminawa. Long descent thou didst not vaunt, thou, but the lord of craftsmen wert thou, Suminawa." And then explanation here. The master is contemplating a wooden image of a crane he has just completed. His tools lie before him, their boxes seen behind. Below are an ink-cord reel, Suminawa, and carpenter's square. The legend is a tanka, short sonnet, to Suminawa, written in Manyō Kana, syllabary of the Manyō age, 8th century AD, Anno Domini. Yep. Okay, so that's the first one. And then we've got plate 2, going down a bit. If we can. Can we go down? Should be able to. Come on, down we go. There we are. And then just make that a bit bigger. That's plate 2 there. It even says so at the top. So what have we got here? Examples of the Hida craftsman's skill. We've got a boat and a bridge and a temple by the look of it. And the comment here, or the caption. Sorry, I need to move down a bit to see it. Chef-d'oeuvre of Suminawa, the movable house. Idealized, see pages 53 to 57, which we've read already. The portable bridge, see page 58, and the mechanical boat, see pages 134 to 147. So that bridge is a portable bridge, and that's a movable house on the right. And the mechanized boat is on the left. So these are all illustrations for the text, as already stated. So this is, what is it, number 3, isn't it? The sennin preparing the elixir. Sennin, if I remember correctly, is a wizard of sorts or hermit, depending on how you write the character. Yeah, we've got to move this out of the way. Sorry, this is in the way a bit. The youth and maid in Senland preparing the elixir. Need to make that a bit bigger, I think. Preparing the elixir, which there. I'm sorry, I can't see that. The reason I can't see it is because there are all kinds of things in the way. This is a bit annoying. Okay, that's better. The youth and maid in Senland preparing the elixir which their passion causes to boil over and be spoiled. Can't read that word there. All the accessories are something drawn. A charcoal bag, fan for the fire, pincers, water jar and ladle, pestle and mortar. Let's see if I can find it in the original book. So, just a moment. Yes. Okay, I'm going to read that bit from the book. The youth and maid in Senland preparing the elixir which their inopportune passion causes to boil over and be spoiled. All the accessories are faithfully shown: charcoal bag, fan for the fire, pincers, water jar, and ladle, pestle, and mortar. Okay. And on the left, we've got the sennin preparing the elixir. This is plate number 4, I think. Yeah. This is arrival at the royal palace of a company of Hida Craftsmen. Okay. Royal Palace in Kyoto. And this, a cock made of wood by Suminawa attacked by a real cock. Which is which? I'm not sure. I think the left one is probably the one made by Suminawa. Next plate. What number is that plate? Let's see if we can check it. I think that's plate 6, is it? Yeah, yes, plate 6. The servitors of the sheriff sent to arrest the craftsman fall into the trap. Ah, yes. We've already just read about that. See page 43. The curious object to the left, just beyond the side of the house, is an ishidoro or stone lantern. To the left, just beyond the side of the house. Ah, yes. We're talking about over here. This is all one. Oh, sorry. Oh dear, it's gone. Where's it gone? It's gone. Can't see it. Oh dear. Oh, that's a nuisance. Screen sharing is paused. Why is that? I don't want to pause it. Yeah. Stop the share and start again, I suppose. Let's try again. Yeah. Okay. So, yeah, here is the stone lantern on the left side. That's the curious object. It's an Ishidoro. All right. That is plate 6, and so we need to go down to the final plate for chapter 1, which is plate 7. And conveniently, it actually says plate 7 there in Roman numerals on the top left, as you can see. And let's see if we can find the caption for this. The trial of skill between Matsumitsu and the craftsman of Hida. Okay, which we've just read about. And let's see. All of these illustrated by Hokusai. On the right, at the bottom, it says, see page 53. The latter wins, exhibiting a head which exactly resembles a freshly decapitated woman's head. Oh, there it is right there, here. On the floor of the veranda is seen Suminawa's crab, and on the mats, the wonderful sake bowl. Oh, I see. So the crab is right here, and there's the sake bowl. Okay, good. And I think with that, we have completed chapter 1. In due course, I might go through the other chapters, but it's going to be quite a lot of hard work to do that over some period of time. How many chapters are we talking about here? I can't remember. Oh gosh, there are 14 chapters. And I've only done 1 today. All right, so I'm going to stop the share now. I do hope you enjoyed that. I thought that was quite fun. No doubt Dickens had fun translating it as well. Good. Well, thank you very much, and I'll see you in the next one. Goodbye now.